In this video, we are going to talk about how to prepare properly for a heritage trip. So let's get started. Preparing for a heritage trip is not all that different from preparing for any other trip, but there are a few things you want to make sure you do ahead of time to get the most out of your experience. The biggest thing is usually to set the intention for your trip. What do you hope to accomplish, and what is the main focus? Are you traveling simply for the experience and to immerse yourself in the culture? Are you trying to find specific records and do more research on something? Are you wanting to connect with potential relatives? All of these are very common goals, but based on what those are, you may want to approach things a little bit differently. Since this is a guide, I'm including my best suggestions for what to do, but feel free to exclude what you don't need. So here are my thoughts. Before your trip, there are a few things that you want to do. So let's go over these one by one. First, identify how the place is connected to you. This may sound obvious, but determining this well ahead of time is essential. You want to know exactly how the place you are visiting is related to you. Who lived there, when, where, and why did they leave? You'll want to do this really early on to give yourself a chance to research thoroughly. You are not going to be able to find every single person or place, so release that expectation right away. That's just the way it goes. You will inevitably come back home only to discover yet another ancestor or connection, regardless of what place you choose. Don't worry about it. It's okay. You're not going to be able to get everything, and that's all right. Just do your best and see what is the deepest connection I can figure out. Next, you want to read up on the history of the region. So now that you know the relationship to this place, read up on everything about that place to get some context, especially for the time period when your ancestor lived there. Was there a war going on? Was there a famine? What else was happening? Those details are so important for you to understand the full story. This, again, is something you should start well ahead of time, so you have some time to take things in and learn. What's the area known for? Whether it's architecture, food, or something else, you'll want to experience all those things when you're there. So do your research and jot down some notes about potential experiences that you might consider partaking in. After that, you want to learn about local customs. And this is important that you do before you start contacting potential living relatives. Know what the do's and don'ts are so that you don't commit a bunch of faux pas unnecessarily. First impressions count, as we all know, and it's always so appreciated when you know a bit about how to show up. It's a sign of respect and genuine interest. Once you know a little bit about how to show up and what to do and not to do, now you can make contact with potential relatives, because one of the most rewarding things to do on a heritage trip is to connect with all those distant relatives that you may not have met before. But a mistake I see happen a lot is that people send a quick email a week before the trip. That is not okay. The last thing you want to do is to spring something like this on a new connection. Like with any new relationship, you want to nurture and develop it before you show up. And the more you do this, the better the trip will go. I have facilitated many of these types of connections over the years, and the ones that go the best are the ones where the relationship develops over a period of time, usually a few months or more. So in a nutshell, you'll want to start thinking about this again well ahead of time and make contact at least 6 months out. That's the minimum. That gives you enough time to explain to the person how you are connected, meaning through what ancestor. You can provide proof of that, and then you can get to know the person and develop the relationship. Don't rush this part, because it'll only be difficult. And once you know a bit about the person that you'll be meeting and the family, you'll have a much easier time picking out a gift for them. And yes, a gift is definitely something you want to bring. It doesn't have to be much, but a little something that says, "Hey, I thought of you," is always appreciated. Usually, I recommend something local from the area that the person might be interested in. For example, a treat from your favorite bakery. When in doubt, something that's always nice are photos from your family line, or maybe a framed family tree so that they can visualize your side of the family. Next, you'll want to plan out your itinerary. And an itinerary is a must for a heritage trip because there'll be so much to see and do in only a limited amount of time. And you'll want to start planning that well in advance too. You'll likely have a few places on your list to begin with, for example, the local library, the local history museum, maybe the local archives, and likely also the place where your ancestor lived. The biggest thing here will be to contact all of these places to verify their hours of operation, their locations, and whether or not you need an appointment. It is always best to contact them ahead of time and let them know that you're coming, plus what days you'd ideally want to visit. Pre-COVID, it may have been okay to just look at a website to see what the hours were, but that is no longer the case as a lot of places have now switched to by appointment only. Also, being on a limited time schedule, you don't want to just show up because the disappointment will be huge if you came that far and then you couldn't get access. So make sure to have all your plans ironed out well ahead of time. When planning your itinerary, also plan in a flex day or two in case something goes wrong. I've been to many places where I wanted to do some research, but for whatever reason, I couldn't get through everything I wanted to see in one day. And when that happens, it's really nice to be able to come back the next day to finish. You want to make sure that you schedule plenty of time for yourself, and if you end up not using it, fine. But if you need it, it's amazing to have it. It makes all the difference. On this point, I also want you to make sure to schedule in some downtime. On heritage trips, it's easy to get carried away with research and documentation and all of those things, but you don't want to forget to just enjoy it too. So make room for some relaxation and fun so you don't have a stressful time on a jam-packed schedule. A little breathing room goes a long way. The next thing you want to do after having checked with the places you're visiting when they're open is to check with them how to reserve what you want to look at ahead of time. This is very common to do at libraries and at archives, and the last thing you want is to show up and find out that someone else has reserved what you need to see. That is very frustrating and will throw everything off. So work this out ahead of time. A lot of places will let you reserve materials online, but if not, check with the staff about how to go about it. This is essential because many archives will also store things in different places, and they'll need advance notice to gather it all up and have it ready for you when you arrive. So don't forget to give them the heads up. Next, ask for permission to film and photograph. This is another pre-production must for your heritage trip. Not all places allow you to film or take photos, so make sure you know what the requirements are. Are you allowed to do that or not? If you need a permit, how do you apply for one and get it approved? And how long is the lead time? Check those things, get them done, and bring proof with you when you visit. This is especially important for historical places and for archives. You'll likely also want to make copies of things that you find in the archives, so make sure you know what the policy is on that and how much that costs. It's also a really good idea to make a shot list, meaning what do you need photos and videos of? Make a list of all those things so that you can remember all of it when you're there, because sometimes it's hard to remember every single thing. Some good examples are a great photo of you and your family in town, a photo with your new relatives, a photo of you trying something new, perhaps some photos of your ancestors' home or grave marker, and of course any landmark signs that you see. A good example that comes to mind instantly for me too when I think about this is that Welcome to Vegas sign that you may have seen in movies. It's always good to have a list of what you want to memorialize beforehand so that you don't forget that stuff when you visit. To find out where all the cool places are, look for maps of your ancestors' time period and overlay them with modern maps to verify that you have the right spots. Finally, before you head out, consider if it's worth getting a local guide to help you. This may cost a bit of money, but it's usually money well spent. This is especially helpful if you don't speak the local language, if it's your first time visiting, or if you'd like a deeper understanding of the culture and history. A great place to start here is to contact the local historical society to see if they know of anyone who might be able to help. Usually they know everyone in town who is an expert. And if that doesn't work out, the local genealogical society usually also have great resources and friendly people who would love to help you explore. Okay, so that was what to do before your trip. Now let's talk about what to do during your trip. And the first thing I want to mention is hard copies. When you are on your trip, you'll want to have backup hard copies of your family tree and information of the people you're trying to research, along with all of the details. Because there's nothing more frustrating than to be someplace exploring and then run out of batteries, or needing to stop to open your computer to check something, or even your phone for that matter. Technology is great, but when you are immersed in an experience, having the paperwork handy instead is actually more helpful. And that way you don't have to worry about battery power or outlets. And you don't want to get stuck because your computer died and you don't have internet where you are. So absolutely bring your technology and use it when you can, but also have a backup plan in place in case that doesn't work. Along those same lines, bring a notepad and functioning pens for taking notes on the go. This is just so helpful when you need to record new details as you're visiting someplace. It'll let you jot down everything that you need so that you can remember it later, rather than having you just rely on a photo, or worse, your memory to get it right, because you'll be taking in so much new stuff that it's going to be hard to keep everything straight. So if you can, bring a notepad and make sure those pens work. If you are also relying on technology, you of course want to bring cords and extra batteries. You want to make sure that everything you have, whether it's cameras, computers, adapters, and so on, is all in working order and charged by the time you need it. If you have the ability to plug things in, that is so useful when you need a full day's worth of power, for example, at an archive. And we all know that cameras and phones are notorious for being low on battery just when you need them the most. So if you need to buy a car charger or bring a few extra batteries, do it so it's not an issue. But keep in mind that if you travel by air, you may have to check your equipment, so make sure that you comply with everything you need to comply with and have protective cases for things. Another thing that I want to mention is something that does double duty for you when you are traveling, and that is a journal. So while you are on your trip, at the end of each day or morning, whichever works better for you, write down a paragraph of where you went, maybe the previous day or this particular day, why you went there, and how you felt when you were there. That will serve you really, really well in two ways. One, it will reinforce the experience for you and let you reflect on what you learn, which often leads to a deeper connection. And number two, it will let you repurpose that diary and information later on into a photo book or slideshow about your experience. Oftentimes, the hardest part about completing a project after a trip is to sit down and remember what you did and then write it down. But if you keep a travel journal, you don't have to. It's already done for you. So 15 minutes a day is all you need to keep track of all those memories, and then you can repurpose that later on into a really cool memory. While on your trip, remember to take lots of photos and refer to the list that you made ahead of time of what photos and videos that you wanted to get. And then take lots and lots from all different angles, perspectives, and subjects. When we're on the trip, it's okay to take too much, because when you get back home, that's when you're going to cull that collection. So don't worry about overdoing it on your trip. It's better to have too much so you can delete some rather than not have enough at all. Okay, so that was what to do on your trip. Now let's talk about after your trip, when you get back home. Obviously, the first thing that you want to do when you get back is to rest up a bit and give yourself some breathing room. But then after that, you want to consolidate your media first thing. Consolidate all the photos, videos, and information that you found on your trip and back it up. Start updating your family tree with all the new information, if you didn't do that while you were on the trip, and put all of that into your system. Don't worry about things that you may have missed. There will be some things that you remember afterwards that you forgot to ask, or perhaps forgot to photograph, and that's okay. Just accept that those things will happen, but make sure that you consolidate everything so that all of that work was not for nothing. Then, second, you'll want to cull that collection and delete everything you don't need. As a photo organizer, I can tell you that it's about 20% of the photos and videos that you need to keep, the ones that tell the story. You can get rid of everything else that you don't need, like the blurry bits and the bad angles. Focus on those gems that tell the story. Then run another backup. And then finally, reflect on your traveling journey and consider creating a project, like a photo book or a slideshow. And if you kept a travel journal while you were exploring, this is super easy because the text is pretty much done and you already have all the visuals you need. Something that I always encourage people to do is to create a fun photo book about the trip and send a full completed copy over to those new relatives that you met on the trip. That brings everything full circle with shared memories, and that keeps the bond going strong. Finally, I want to give you some ideas about what to pack for a heritage trip that might be different from what you need on a regular trip. Obviously, you want to travel lightly, but you want to make sure that you have space for the important things that will help you enjoy the experience to the fullest. And you'll have to create your own list, but here's what I bring every time I head out. So specifically for research and for documenting my heritage travel, I bring my printed itinerary, contact information for everyone that I'm meeting, a printed family tree, copies of old photos and important records so I can compare them with things I find over there, copies of photos and records that I might want to hand to new relatives, maps for the research area I'm in, Notepad and working pens, permit slips for any media that I might want to capture, and any relevant communication that I might have had with the people in charge, as well as confirmation of all bookings that I have. Those were my must-haves specifically for research, but when it comes to technology, I also bring a laptop computer with a charger, an external hard drive if needed, outlet adapters, a portable scanner like a FlipPal with a charger, because they run through a ton of batteries, a GoPro camera with a charger and extra batteries, as well as a DSLR camera with charger and extra batteries. Those are my must-haves. You can add your own, but I hope this gives you a little bit of an idea of where to start. So I hope this was a helpful guide for you on how to prepare for a heritage trip. With a little bit of planning and a lot of excitement, it is sure to become one of the most meaningful trips you have ever been on. So enjoy and have a great trip.